Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar together with Bitmovin. We're going to talk today about how Bitmovin improves their customers' streaming experience with real-time analytics. My name is Georg Tra. I'm the head of customer engineering at CrateIO, and I have with me today Daniel from Bitmovin. Daniel, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Georg, and hi, everyone. Glad to be here. I'm Daniel. I'm the engineering director for analytics here at Bitmovin. I've been with Bitmovin for the last 6 years now, and yeah, working together with Crate for, I think, now 5.5 of that. And yeah.
So Daniel and I already do have a connection. As I said, I'm head of customer engineering at CrateIO, working very closely with our customers and partners. And so we already know each other very well, and especially also the use case. And we thought that it definitely would be nice to talk about this use case as it really represents also what CreateDB is good to be used for. In terms of agenda for today's webinar, we're going to start with a short introduction to CreateDB, just as a reminder what the technology is about. Then we will hear a short introduction about Bitmovin and the analytics solution from Bitmovin, and then go to our common success stories and how CreateDB and CrateIO enable Bitmovin to build their products. And at the end, we will have a short Q&A session. Just as for the housekeeping rules, there is a Q&A function in the Zoom webinar. Please send us any questions also during the webinar. We will answer or try to answer them as best as possible at the end of the session. And yeah, already looking forward to that. As said, a short introduction to CrateDB, what really is our main technology. So CrateDB is a distributed SQL database for real-time analytical use cases and really combines features from the performance side with the ability to run ad hoc queries across hundreds of billions of records in under 1 second. You make use of the columnar storage in CrateDB for hyperfast aggregations, also across billions of records in a very fast manner. And yeah, all this is enabled with a basically fully distributed query engine that is built on top of Apache Lucene and makes use of the indexing and columnar store in the database. But all that performance would not be good enough to really have a nice, easy to use solution and have the flexibility that you want. So CreateDB combines these performance aspects with standard SQL and the PostgreSQL protocol for really easy onboarding and create tool compatibility for many tools out of the box, and allows you through the flexibility in the data model to analyze relational data next to object and time series data, as well as using geospatial and full text indexing and full text search in the database in a very fast manner. Last but not least, also important for today's use case, scalability and reliability. When we're talking about real-time use cases, we're talking about use cases that scale in the amount of data, but also really need a high availability. As we see later, systems that really directly interact with the database need to be available in order for the systems to work. And so this is also a core focus of CreateDB with the built-in functionalities. CreateDB itself is fully open source by now. You can install it and use it and run it on any kind of system you want. But we also do have a fully managed cloud solution with CreateDB Cloud. You can go there and start a cluster just with a click of a button. Everything is fully managed by CrateIO engineers and is today available on all major cloud platforms to be started. We also do have a solution that we launched last year, CreateDB Edge, which enables you to run CreateDB on your own Kubernetes clusters, but still use also the creature comforts of a cloud solution in a hybrid setup. And as I said before, you can use CrateDB also in the open source variant and install it pretty much on any hardware that is supported. That's it in terms of the super short introduction to CrateDB. But as I said, we really want to focus on our common use case today. And I would like to ask Daniel a bit of background about, first of all, what Bitmovin does and a bit of the history of what Bitmovin has been doing in the last years.
Yeah, thank you, Georg. So Bitmovin as a company was founded now 10 years ago almost in Klagenfurt. So I'm also from Klagenfurt in the sunny south of Austria. And Klagenfurt has a university that has been always very involved in the MPEG standardization, which is something not a lot of people probably know, but this is also where the company comes from. So it's a spin-off from the university. Our founders have been working on the MPEG standard and contributed heavily to that, and then founded the company to commercialize these findings. They then got accepted to the Y Combinator 2015, have 30 plus patents in the streaming media space, so player encoding and other things. And we now still continue this collaboration with the University of Klagenfurt by having a shared research project with the university. And so that's Bitmovin in a nutshell. As a company, then from a product perspective, we have 4 products. So we have the Bitmovin encoding, the player, the analytics, and Bitmovin streams. Encoding obviously is a product that you need to be able to share video online in a streaming format. So everything that you take with your iPhone is not by default streamable. So it will take a long time to download. It will be just available in one quality. If the network conditions change, you need to then use a standard like MPEG- or HLS. And the Bitmovin encoder is a cloud native encoding product that can deliver these transcodings very, very fast. Because of our distributed cloud nature, obviously. And then the player as the second product that was also released already 10 years ago now is also comes out of that standard. So to play video on the different devices, on the different flavors of web devices that we have nowadays, like smart TVs, iOS and Android devices, Roku devices, but also on the web and the different browsers, you do need a standardized player that takes care of all the idiosyncrasies of these different platforms. And this is where the player comes in to provide our users, our customers, a consistent platform where they can just expect their streams that they did encode to actually also play without any hiccups. And then the logic third product from this, so encoding player were first, and then analytics came as a third one, was, okay, you need to also be able to measure this. You need to be understanding what is the experience that customers are having with your streams, what's the quality that's being delivered, how long does it take to start, and all the things that you're actually trying to optimize by going for a streaming protocol, you also need to somehow measure. And so analytics was the logic third step to that. And this is where the Bitmovin analytics product then was added to the portfolio also now 6 years ago. And then the fourth product, which is something that I'm really excited about, as we just released it a month ago. And actually, I think the press release went out yesterday, is Bitmovin Streams, which is the combination of these three in a very easy to use solution. So customers that before you had to wire these products together yourself, and we always expected our customers were expected to have infrastructure where they host these things, and when you transcode things, that you put it in your own cloud, in your own buckets, and you host the player and you have that. And with Bitmovin Streams, we now basically provide you a very easy drag and drop solution. You just go to the website, drag the video, you get the link that you can directly embed on your website and continue with your stuff, and we take care of all the nitty-gritty details of video streaming and just make sure that it plays everywhere and that you see where it's playing, how it's playing, and all these things. Yeah.
So you're basically offering a complete solution for any kind of video streaming platform, but also like the platform itself by now to build up on top of that.
Exactly. I always say, like, if you want to build the next Netflix, we have all the tools for your toolbox. But also, and these now also in different variants of complexity and involvement. So you can go very hands-off. You just need video and you want to build like a very basic social network without going too much into the details of your streaming infrastructure. Then you use streams. or you can really tweak everything to the last bit and byte by using the player and the encoding and the analytics by themselves and tweak them to as much as you want.
So as you mentioned, today is all about analytics, and that's also where the success story of Crate.io and Bitmovin, the common success story, started. Let's talk about us working together. By maybe starting, how did it all start? Like our collaboration. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, how did it all start? I mean, as I said before, it started as a strategic decision to create this new product, to create the third product to the other two, to augment what we had with encoding and player, because obviously you need to measure what's happening on the client, and it doesn't matter what you see in your lab or what you think will happen. It's really the reality that counts. And for that, we then decided to launch this product. And in 2016, as an experiment, actually, so we were actually testing different databases and different types of APIs and like just very rapid prototyping of what we want to do. And yeah, in the end, we settled for CrateDB from our initial tests, and from built an MVP around that, showed that at NAB 2017. So NAB is this North American Broadcasters Conference in Las Vegas. That was also my first time to Vegas, which was quite a shock. Yeah, and so we showed it to customers back then without the dashboard, without the UI, without anything. Like everything at Bitmovin, it was really an API-only product. So it's also still, you can fully use it with the API only. You don't need the dashboard. But then we quickly found out, okay, this has potential. Customers really like the concept and what we do on a technical level, but they also don't want to code to see their data. So that we then released in 2018 the dashboard. Started building a full graphing solution that you see here on the right, where you can kind of see the main screen of the dashboard. That started our adoption in the industry. And we now have some pretty interesting high-profile customers.
So you basically, with this solution, you can monitor your client's behavior, right? Or your client's behavior again.
It's always a little bit confusing, because what we're actually monitoring is the behavior of the player that you would embed on your site. So our customers are obviously big telcos, big broadcasters, or also small businesses or medium, whatever. Anyone that wants to do video on the web and has a player can use Bitmovin Analytics. We also do support all the open source players and not just our own player. So it's really no excuse to not use this and get some insights into the streaming behavior of our customers' clients. And basically what we do is, whenever you hit the play button on one of the players where we are deployed, we then start measuring all the things that happen to this player. So how long does it take to start the video? Was there an error? What quality did this video start up with? Did the video buffer? How long did people watch? And so on. I think we have a screenshot of that anyways.
Yeah, I think before we go to that, maybe you mentioned it before. You tried out different kind of things, but as far as I know, you were basically jumping in at the later stage. But still, let's talk about what were the initial requirements for what did you think about when you said, okay, we're gonna build these analytic solutions, and we're gonna need a database for that. Can you elaborate on that? What was the initial ideas for that?
Yeah, I mean, as with most of these things, is if you look at the internet, half of it, or probably more than half of it, is now used for video. So video is a huge use case, and it was already back then, and so it has just grown from there. So we knew that we will have to support some pretty insane loads in the end. And so we did put out some load testing numbers that we wanted to hit and investigate, okay, which databases could hit that. We also needed fault tolerance. I mean, you can't run a software as a service business and have outages during restarts or something like that. So that was a big thing that we really tested, like how stable is this thing? How much load can it cope with? And then also, does it get us to what we want, which was also being real time. It was something that we initially, kind of intuitively wanted to have, like, yeah, it should be in real time. You should be able to see the metrics in real time as they come in. Something that is we then found out that there's less of standard in the analytics industry, especially in business analytics, where you look at data that's usually days old or hours old, so it doesn't really matter so much. But for us, it was really important that within 5 to 10 seconds, you already have the data there, because operations teams that are sitting during a live sport event or something, looking at the metrics, they want to know if something goes wrong before everyone knows and Twitter knows. So
Yeah.
you really want to be real time. And then obviously the one key thing also was how easy was it to get started. And this was something where Crate really excelled. I mean, on the expected load and the fault tolerance, this was something that presented itself really easily. So the fault tolerance was something that we could easily see, that Crate in itself with the UI and how you see the cluster already had built in by default. So it was really stable, recovered and everything. In our initial test, so that was cool. And also the load. I mean, obviously, in hindsight, you always know that you didn't test the right things in the end. but it performed admirably, and then it was also really easy with a SQL interface to build something on top of that was immediately familiar to our developers, and that didn't take a very long period of getting used to the language and whatever, by just being able to use ANSI SQL. That made it much simpler to get started.
I think that also basically perfectly summarizes what we really aim for, like the scalability aspect with the high availability and the ease of use. And yeah, I think that's also in terms of use case perspective. I mean, we also have experience of working together in and had some happenings, let's say that way, and were surprised that nodes were gone, but it turned out it was like someone decided to turn off on VM, but everything recovered from itself again. And, fun surprises that you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we of course we talked about scalability. I mean, as a database, it's always also interesting, really, what kind of data do you really store in that? Is it like you mentioned, it's like user behavior? Is it some sort of time series data? How do you see it, and how would you describe it? What you're storing? Yeah, I mean, time series. It sounds ominous, but the output comes in different forms to our customers. So they want, on the one hand, you want to have time series. So you want to be able to understand how did my viewership, like the number of viewers, develop over the last few days, the last 90 days or something like that. So you want the time series where you can see metrics over time. But then also this other thing, we really want to go deep. And this is one of the key things that differentiates us from others, is that you can really go and inspect a single session and see not just the time series of the aggregate of how did your startup time across the platform change and these things, but really drill down into an individual session, into one user. And it really goes to the point where if someone calls a customer of ours and tells them, hey, your service isn't working, they can actually look up their user ID from their own database and then go into analytics and find all the sessions of this user and really debug into, oh, you've been using Firefox, this version doesn't support this and that, change it to this. And so really being able to like very topically support customers is really important. And so what we do collect is really, as I said before, everything about the video session. So we have this concept of collectors that we deploy alongside the player, and the collectors figure out the life cycle of the playback, and then collect all the relevant state changes that somehow impact the user experience and send that back to Crate. And each of these time spans represents a row with lots of measurements and data. And then, as I said, we collect what is being watched, how long does it take to start, how long are people watching, buffering, seeks, errors, and so on. And you see this in the graph on the bottom. This is one session, and how we visualize it in the dashboard. We can really see the blue line is the quality. So the y-axis is the bit rate of this session. And then you really see where there's no connection between the dots. There was a pause in there, so the user pressed pause on the player. Then you see whenever the blue line jumps up or down, that's a quality switch. Then the violet lines are the seeking, so someone seeked ahead or behind. And also then in the data, you also can find out where did they seek to, so you can even see, okay, people are always skipping this part, they don't like that part of the video or something. And then the yellow part is when it's buffering. So something happened to the network, something didn't work, and so on. And you can really then
for one user really find out, okay, they watched this many seconds, then they skipped, they did all of this, and you really get it's like DVR, but for the user in front of the video. So you can really play back their session.
So you see both basically technical metrics or technical information about the streaming experience, and on the other hand, you see basically how also videos perform, right? If people are skipping certain parts, if people watching ads and so on.
Exactly. And I mean, our focus is obviously on the technical part. That is where we see our strength to really give people detailed error information and like deep insights into the technical performance of the videos. But obviously, the other side of collecting all this data is that you can also very well tell people like, hey, who's watching what and where. And I mean, obviously all anonymized and so on. But still, you get the marketing metrics for free if you do the technical part. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I think it all started 6 years ago, if I remember correctly. Also, our journey has been a while together. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned scalability was one of the core aspects of selecting the database, of selecting CreateDB. Blunt question: how did it work out? How did it scale for you?
Yeah, I would even say that I think our journey together probably started when we had to figure out the scaling part, and because obviously it worked out the box for our initial tests and everything, but then once we saw reality, we had to obviously find out how to actually make it work. And this is when we started working together. And yeah, how did it scale? I mean, really well. It still works, and we've been very happy and still base all of our service on mostly on CrateDB and what CrateDB enables us. So for us, CrateDB is an infrastructure layer that we can then build a lot of stuff on top. So we now have like over 6 years built up a lot of infrastructure on top of Crate, and tuning also the way we use Crate for a use case, and that leads us to, at any point in time, ingesting around 30,000 requests per second to our database, which goes up to peaks of like 80,000 requests per second. We had the biggest websites in the world use us. We are monitoring the biggest live events that you can watch on the internet. And yeah, we have queries that easily go over tens of terabytes of data. So if one of these very big customers were to go and say like, hey, give me 90 days of data, there's a lot of data being crunched in the background. And yeah, which obviously poses a lot of interesting challenges, not just for the database. The database can do most of that, but also like how do you build a system where where queries are running for a long time and so on. Yeah, and the one key thing obviously that is also really important, but might be overlooked sometimes, is we always ingest this data. So there's always a lot of data coming in, and we also need always to be able to satisfy queries. As I said, in a live use case, if an ops team is monitoring one of these big live sports events, they also want to have the data. It's not just enough that we say, hey, we have it, we can tell you more about it, but they want it now. And so we need to be able to support queries and ingesting lots and lots of data at the same time.
And as I assume, I mean, you are now a global company and have customers all around the world and users all around the world for the product. I mean, it's something that has to be available 24/7, and you have both interest and probably also queries from your customers happening throughout the days.
Exactly. So that was also something that we had to figure out over time and like build really infrastructure around. For example, updates for major CrateDB updates, for example, that can't be done in a rolling fashion by Crate itself, which need a cluster restart, is something where we have built a lot of infrastructure to be able to safely do this, and like also have a second cluster running that then graciously takes over and so on. So yeah, it's lots of fun stuff to figure out once you have this requirement of being available all the time.
I think that's the fun stuff of building a SaaS company nowadays, that you basically need to be available 24/7, or this is the expectancy. Let's talk about, so you said it already a bit in the beginning, that it was easy to onboard CreateDB also because of SQL or ANSI SQL. But yeah, maybe let's also talk about what maybe did not go that well, or where you also say, okay, that makes sense to work together with CreateDB, or what was some of the pitfalls or the pain points that you encountered?
Yeah, I mean, looking back is always easy to say to say it now, but the one thing we learned is that we really need to involve the experts much sooner, because just because it looks like SQL doesn't mean that it behaves like your regular MySQL database or your Postgres, but it's a very different beast under the covers. So all the things, a lot of the assumptions that people go in when they see a SQL database sometimes go out of the window, and we have been surprised more than once by Crate just performing way better than we expected. You know, like what you said, with huge aggregation going through terabytes of data, and it finishes in 10 seconds, and you're totally baffled. Why can this be? How can this be so fast? And then at other times you do something quite mundane and think like, yeah, it's not that much. It's 1 million records, and then it takes super long and uses a lot of resources internally. So we made a lot of mistakes by just not knowing what's going on the covers in the beginning. So we weren't using batching. Back then, when we got started, also Crate itself was not as forthcoming with metrics as it is nowadays. So we also had to like figure out how to monitor this and how to integrate it with our alerting systems. And as I said, not knowing what internally happens, how the data structure looks like on disk, how the indexes work, which queries we can expect to be fast, which ones we need to take care of and make sure that they are properly protected. Yeah, and then also the properly protection part, customers do lots of weird things. And yeah, you always are surprised sometimes by things that customers do.
I think that's always also important in working together with our customers. I mean, to figure out also what they want to do, because it's like, yeah, you basically need the information. If you see, okay, they want to query that way, then we might be able, might have to improve the performance for some of these queries, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And so getting you folks on board and giving you access to the right tools and the metrics and explaining the use cases then also led us to tweak a lot about the cluster, like also on the hardware side. I mean, I don't think we mentioned this, but we do run bare metal on our own hardware that we rent from AWS, and obviously which disks to use, what parameters to use for the disks, how big should the nodes be. We also went from like very weird setup that we thought is smart to a much more sane cluster topology, because we were trying to be very clever and separate out query nodes and master and the main nodes and the data nodes. And then we found out that it's probably better to not do that in our use case, and also like how to partition the data and how to shard it and how to avoid hotspotting in the ingest side. So that was all something that that we needed help with, that we needed someone that knows how it will behave and that has also seen more than one cluster in their life. Because we always have a sample size of one, so everything that we know about Crate, obviously we know from our own experience, and when we go into a new use case or something, we're like, it's really useful to have someone on call to like, hey, we want to try this very stupid thing. Is it maybe gonna work or not? Because for us, obviously, a lot of the scalability and stuff we need to also test in production, and testing in production is always more expensive than having a call with you, Georg.
Yeah, I think that brings it to the point. I think, and especially also, I mean, you mentioned monitoring. I think it's like doing it together and seeing how clusters perform, being able to analyze with the customers and what might be some issues that you're running in. I think that's like, yeah, I think that our collaboration on that is really good and really great, and yeah, always happy also to see when things work out the right way. Talking about working things out the right way, but maybe also the wrong way. What were the overall in our collaboration? What would you say were the key learnings in working together with Crate and Crate.io and with CreateDB?
I mean, as said, there's a lot of stuff that stands out for us. Like, it was really easy to get started, and it's still whenever we onboard new developers to the team, it's quite nice to see how easy it is to pick up and understand it, and compared to something like Mongo, for example, where you have to learn a whole query language and this JSON notation. And then obviously this improved a lot over the last year. So nowadays the documentation is really great, and this is something that's also very helpful, especially when onboarding new people, that you have like a good documentation and a very familiar interface. Then we have to also teach people that, yeah, it's not always that way. So don't expect it to be like your regular SQL database, but still it makes it easier to get started. And yeah, as it's also said, it scales really well. So if tuned well, and if you build your use cases around it, and you know how to use it, it scales to some insane loads, and it's also very robust and reliable. You obviously, like every database, there's always a way to kill it in the end, but if you treat it right, it can do a lot of cool things, and that very hands off. So we still don't have we do have a lot of monitoring and measuring, but we still get away without being on without having developers on call or something like that. So that's really cool, and a testament to how stable and reliable it is over time. Yeah, and then the third thing, as I said a few times, it's really important to have someone on the other side of the line if stuff goes south. So having someone that really knows the database in and out is really important. And yeah, we have to test and tune every query at scale. We need to and also keep reviewing these things. So customers always come up with new ways to do things a little bit differently that then might have other performance implications for us. And that's maybe something that where we get better over time in designing our APIs and designing the paths that you can go through the system. But also it's sometimes a lot of detective work to find this out, and something that looks easy, like a null check, for example, if you look at it at the database level, then it becomes an expensive thing, because this is something that Crate handles very differently from like the other aggregations where you go through terabytes of data and you don't even notice it. Yeah.
I think that's always also a good fair point. I mean, we're talking about big systems or big data systems. We're talking about tens or hundreds of terabytes of data that are queried. So, of course, if you do it wrong, then you still. I mean, yeah. If we end up with a row scan basically on hundreds of terabytes of data, then this is something, that of course also is expensive in Crate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Crate is not the silver bullet. It's just and a very well put together database, but also being familiar with the underlying concepts and what it can and cannot do. And this is something that I think the Crate engineers think a lot more than I do myself or my team. So it's really helpful to be able to also ask the experts and like, hey, is this even realistic what we're trying to do, or should we try to not do it or find another way?
Yeah. I mean, also about finding another way. I mean, of course, also in the collaboration we do that. But to give you also the chance, what would you change, or what would be the wishes for the future of CreateDB?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of the stuff that we would want to change, so that was really burning, you already did, like the hyperlog aggregation. I think that was the first thing that we got implemented for our use case, because I don't think anyone else needed that. And it was one of the key things where we saw like, okay, the normal distinct count aggregations don't work with Crate, or don't finish inside the memory constraints we have. So when we have something that's really burning, we get it usually, or we can contribute it ourselves to the Crate code base. And there are some things that are just that we would like to have that are becoming more and more relevant now. It's like data locality and data topology. So being able to, for us, as I said, Crate is like an infrastructure layer for us in a lot of ways, and being able to more consciously distribute data and move data to certain nodes, and being able to like use. So right now we always run on SSDs, and very large SSDs at these, so they are really expensive. So being able to move data that is less frequently used to cheaper storage inside the cluster, or have the cluster also be of multiple levels of cluster, being able to move data between those nodes and between the disk types would be something that would be interesting for us. As well as like having more control over shard allocations, and when we shard, how we shard, because that was all things that we currently were important do manually or through some external process. But having more APIs around that would obviously be helpful for what we are doing right now. Yeah, and then obviously one thing which is something that I still have on the list for the team to implement at some point, is to have top K, constant memory top K aggregations, because if you do a group by a very high cardinality field or something, it obviously creates a lot of memory pressure. So we currently have a lot of safeguards in place for these things, but having something that just works, that would be something that I think we might be contributing at some point once we have more time.
I think time is always almost the big question. Also, we already read progressed in terms of the timing in the webinar. So you mentioned before already that some of your products are also that they now are also accessible for smaller use cases. You have a free trial, I think, also a free tiers available for the products.
Exactly. So you can come to our website, look up what we're doing, and you can also sign up for a free account. And the free account comes with a 14-day free trial that gives you access to all the products, all the features, and you can just test it out. Also, like the analytics product, if you sign up for a pay-as-you-go plan, there's even a very large chunk of free, so it's like freemium. So you get a very large chunk of impressions for free to get you started, and the same for the player and the same for encoding, I think. And with streams, obviously, it also is very easy to get started, but it was also easy before, I have to say.
All right, you mentioned already our documentation, and maybe also as information, we will send out these slides afterwards, so that you get all the links and all the information also. We do have as I said, CreateDB is an open source product. We do have a community page with a discourse forum also. So if you have any kind of questions about CreateDB, feel free to also go there, ask questions. We always also try to help people getting started with CreateDB if they just want to try it out, if they want to use it. And also don't forget to give us a star on GitHub. Also, always nice to see the appreciation there. I will also talk about it later, but we also do have a free cloud trial available, so you can test out CreateDB Cloud for 1 month for free, and more information also on that later. As I said, we are now gonna have a short Q&A session. Please, if you have any questions, insert into the Q&A functionality. I also see that there are already some questions in there. The very first question, I don't know if Daniel, do you also see them? The very first question, I'm gonna read it out anyway. So this is towards Bitmovin or towards you. Did you migrate to Crate from an existing database? How long will it take to migrate my existing data? So
for me, no, we did not. I mean, as I said, it was a new product, so we also built this from scratch, so we didn't have any existing data. Also nowadays, we turn around all the data, so it's an append-only use case in our case, so we add data all the time, and then obviously we delete old data once they run out of retention. For how long it takes to migrate existing data, I think that's more your avenue, Georg.
I think that's always something, of course, that depends on the use case, depends on how much data we're talking, and if we do some sort of live migration, or if it is something that can be done with a downtime. But I think it's, as you also mentioned, I think it's easy with SQL to move data and to work with existing also often schemas and to migrate the data in that way. And of course, also, we are always happy to help, both in a support kind of way, but also, of course, also if you have any kind of questions like that, go to our community, ask the question there, and we will be happy to help there. So another question that was coming in is how I can try CreateDB on the cloud. As I said before, CreateDB does offer a 1 month free trial with a budget, so that you can start clusters of various size and test out the performance for your use case. And this can be done quite quickly by just following a link, and basically I think it's a a very few steps, maximum 5, to really start a cloud cluster and get up and running. Yeah, another question to Daniel. I don't know how much you want to go into detail with this one, but what kind of type of companies are using your products, and yeah.
Sure. I mean, as I said before, I mean, our typical customers used to be, and we were very much focused on enterprise in the beginning, where like very big telecommunication companies, or very big broadcasters or stuff like that. So some of our customers, for example, are the BBC, RTL in Germany, ClassPass, which is a big e-learning provider, or the New York Times, for example. And these types of customers, like the big media names, are usually our customers, or used to be. But also, obviously, we have expanded back as the team grew and as we have more capacity to also support smaller customers, and the products, quite frankly, became more mature and more usable. We also now offer all of these again to everyone. And as I said, it's very easy to get started. And we also have a community where we answer questions and where we help people. So yeah, you don't need to be the BBC to use Bitmovin.
I think that's an important point. Often it's if you want to start small and start your own business using streaming technologies, that might be very relevant. To get started, to have your own platform and use from encoding to analytics, basically everything that Bitmovin offers. Another question was, what kind of types of data can be used with CrateDB. I mentioned it in the beginning. So CrateDB is really has the ability to use relational data, or you can basically have a strict schema with defined columns, but you're also able to use really semi-structured data. You can directly ingest JSON and query on them as you would do on columns. And typical kind of data. So large any kind of logs, metrics, streams of data, like we also saw in the Bitmovin use case, where we really say, okay, we have like information about the user sessions. This could be, of course, also automated system, or in different kind of application in different kind of industries. Maybe I ask another question that came up: how does the support work with us? As I mentioned, we have like 3 different products right now. What we are offering for the cloud product, the support is really all encompassing. That goes from running the clusters to really supporting you with any kind of questions that's coming in. Really maintaining the clusters 24/7 for you without the need to have your own engineers on that. And if your situation demands it, that you're running CrateDB on your own hardware, run it on and maintain it on your own, we of course also willing to support here and have a team of support engineers, including a support portal ready for you to ask us any kind of questions and get, I think, most of the time or always a good answer to your problems.
Yeah, and I can also say to that, I mean, we do have we obviously pay for 24/7 live support, and we always get, if there's an issue, we can always call someone, and we will have sometimes a very sleepy engineer on the phone, but we'll have someone that will also look into our actual cluster. So I think that's really cool to actually have that. You also know about our setup, our Grafana, so there's like you have access to our monitoring and can also debug this and look at the logs, and which makes it a lot easier for us at Bitmovin, obviously, as we don't have to like play the man in the middle shipping. Hey, have you looked at this log? Have you looked at that? And so on. So it's really very technically hands-on support.
Is there a specific backup strategy for CrateDB at Bitmovin?
What do you mean backup strategy?
The question was, is there a specific backup strategy for big data at Bitmovin using CrateDB? From what I know, maybe you can talk about what you. So maybe if I give the answer from CrateDB, we do support snapshot repositories and doing incremental backups using repositories on AWS S3 compatible repositories, and also network shares, and including also Azure and other providers. But maybe Daniel, you can also answer how you are doing it and what you're doing in that regard.
Exactly. I mean, we are doing exactly that. So we leverage that CrateDB has built-in backup support, encrypted backup support, I have to say. So we do store all of our backups in AWS S3 with the KMS managed encryption, which then Crate obviously automatically does incremental backups there. And then obviously we rely a lot on Crate itself being very reliable and robust. So yeah, we do the daily backups. We do the Crate. The Crate itself is clustered, so we have never lost any data. But also we have built also infrastructure around the cases where we have to shut down Crate for a time, or if something goes terribly wrong, where we then also have backups from the backups again. So we buffer data when they can't be ingested, and so on and so forth. And yeah, then you also have all the other things that you can do on the disk. So we also had like disk snapshots, which turned out to be a very bad idea because yeah, a database seems to not like it when you have very unpredictable performance when reading, when coming back from a snapshot. But yeah, you can also take snapshots, and we do that in regular intervals when we have to like do some changes to the hardware. So on.
All right. So there is no more open questions. Just as a general reminder again, there is a free CreateDB cloud trial, also with the link here. Again, you can start with $200 free credits and use it as you would want and try out different configurations. I would very much like to thank you, Daniel, for joining us today. And yeah, I think it was an interesting talk or an interesting conversation. And I also look forward our continuous working together and see how we can make also CreateDB better with and for you.
Yeah, thank you, Georg. It was a great conversation. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
And thank you to all our viewers. And as I mentioned, you will get the slides afterwards. And please feel free to share any kind of feedback with us.